I read Batman Earth 1 the other day, and it reminded me of something that I've thought about off and on for the last several years as a reader of superhero comics, and that is how tired I am of seeing the origin stories of familiar characters retold ad nauseum. I mean, it would be so lovely if we could just have a general agreement among fans and creators that we'll just stop retelling the origin stories of characters. Batman Earth 1 is, you could compare it to the Marvel Ultimate line. It's DC's version of sort of restarting Batman in an alternate universe in a completely separate continuity from the regular DC universe. And it retells the origins of Batman, the murder of Thomas and Martha Wayne, and Bruce's beginnings as a costumed adventurer in the early days of Jim Gordon, and Harvey Bullock is also featured in a prominent supporting role. And it's not bad. I mean, the artwork is by Gary Frank, who is just amazing, just a phenomenal artist, one of my favorite artists right now. It's great. It looks great, but as far as the story goes, the best I can say about it is pretty good, because it just seems so familiar. I've heard this story so many times. There are changes to the traditional Batman story, like for instance, Batman's mother, Martha Wayne, her maiden name is now established as having been Arkham. So Bruce Wayne is the child of the Waynes and also the Arkhams. The Asylum Arkhams. And, you know, and that's okay, it's kind of interesting, I guess, but, and then they do other things like, instead of Gordon starting out as like the one honest cop in town, he opens the story as kind of a browbeaten, fearful, corrupt cop who looks the other way when criminals do things because he thinks that they murdered his wife years ago, and he wants to protect his daughter. And Barbara Gordon is, I suppose, now once again his biological daughter, as opposed to his adopted daughter, as she has been for many, many years in the comics. And that's interesting. And Harvey Bullock comes in, and he's Gordon's partner, and he's transferred in from Hollywood Homicide. He eventually becomes disillusioned, and we see him starting down the road of becoming the more familiar Bullock that we know of from the mainstream DC comics. And all of this, I mean, none of it is bad particularly, but whenever they retell a familiar origin story, whenever they go back and tell us yet again how Batman became Batman, or how Spider-Man became Spider-Man, or how Superman came from the planet Krypton and landed on Earth in this small Kansas town, and he was found by these two farmers who happened to be passing by, and he was raised. It's a story that we don't need to hear, because it's a story that we've all already heard. We've already heard this story. And when they do something like Earth 1, where it's a reboot and it's meant to be different, they change details like I've been describing, but it always just feels like they're rearranging the furniture. It's the same room. The story is the same. Yes, okay, sure, in this version, Thomas Wayne wasn't just a wealthy doctor. He was a candidate for mayor. And the Penguin is actually the mayor of Gotham, who is sort of the head of all this corruption, and who may have orchestrated the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne. And I mean, and it just feels like, oh, I bet you didn't expect us to use the Penguin like that, huh? You know, it just feels very self-conscious, very, very self-consciously clever, and that really is off-putting. And it doesn't do anything to change the fact that the story is familiar and redundant and unnecessary. We've heard it. And I have the same feeling about the new Superman movie coming out next year. Because apparently, I mean, they hired Russell Crowe to play Jor-El. There's gonna be fucking Krypton shit. I know there are differing opinions on this. Some people like the Krypton stuff. If I were writing Superman, be it a comic, a television series, a film, you would never hear about Krypton ever again. You would never see it. You'd never meet anybody from Krypton. Krypton would be gone in the past. Krypton's where he came from. It blew up. We all know this. That's not going to be a part of the story. except as the assumed backstory. And I think the character in comics that has suffered the most from this tendency to constantly revisit the origin stories, to tell and retell and retell, to keep reshooting the pilot episode, as it were, is Captain Marvel, DC's Captain Marvel, Shazam. Because I think, and I may be wrong on this, but I think every major Captain Marvel comic book published in like the last 10 years, at least the one-shots, have all retold the origin. They've all been the same story. And every time because I love Captain Marvel, and every time I hear about a new Captain Marvel book coming out, I get excited. Because I remember when Jeff Smith, the creator of Bone, did a Captain Marvel comic. And I thought, oh wow, awesome, Jeff Bone doing Captain Marvel, that's just great. And I picked it up and I read it, and it was good, and you know, it was very well done, very charming. Jeff Smith is a really talented guy. But I was reading it, and you just instantly get this sense of deflation when you read it and you realize, oh, it's the fucking origin story. This is an instance, and admittedly one of the few, where I think we would be well advised to follow the example of 1980s action television series, which just fucking started. Like, if you watch the pilot episode of MacGyver, he's already MacGyver in the first episode. You don't see the first time he picks up the fucking pocket knife. You don't see his first day at work at the DXS. You don't see anything other than a typical MacGyver adventure. And through that adventure, we learn the basic facts about MacGyver that we need in order to enjoy the show from that point on. Basically who he is, what his skills are, what his personality is like, what the character and the point of view of the show will be, all of that. You don't need to start at the very beginning. Fuck origin stories. We all know them. And if we don't know them, most of the time we don't actually need them. At least we don't need them explicitly dramatized in such exacting detail. I really wish that storytellers, whether their medium be comics or television or film or literature, whatever, would start skipping the origins and just start telling me the fucking story already.